The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining us today for our Vendor Spotlight webinar. My name is Lisa Williams. I am on staff with NPMA, and I am here to thank the fellas from A2B Tracking for providing great content for us today. Just for those interested, if you are an NPMA member, you will be getting one CEU for attending this session, and you will find that on your learning transcript. Everybody will receive an email after this event, and you will get that information. And now I'm going to turn it over right now to Don Faria with A2B Tracking.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. So before we get started, we're going to launch a quick poll. And in the meantime, while we're going to launch this poll, I'm just going to cover a few housekeeping items, but here is the poll. And we just want to ask you, is your organization currently using RFID? And the options are yes, part of your daily operations, or in the early stages looking to improve, or no, not yet. You can just take a quick second to respond to that. And in the meantime, this session will be recorded, and we will be sharing the video recording in an email with a copy of the slide deck. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. However, as we move along, feel free to enter any questions you may have during the webinar in the questions box of your GoToWebinar panel, and we will get to them as we can. So let's take a quick look at these results. And ooh, pretty strong on no, not yet. So this is great. Part of the daily operations are 11% and in early stages, but looking to improve. So this is a good mix. Primarily, the majority of you are not in that stage yet. So hopefully this webinar will give you some insightful information. So we're joined today by a large, diverse audience, including property managers of small, medium, and large government contractors, also some educational institutions, and some research facilities. So in today's session, we're going to focus on RFID for property. And as you may know, managers today are being expected to move faster than ever before. Organizations, they don't have the luxury to have an incomplete or inaccurate inventory. They need to be able to perform their inventories quickly and accurately. RFID is meeting this challenge by providing organizations, with real-time inventory updates, saving a significant amount of time, and improving inventory accuracy to a rate of 99% or better. Organizations who make the investment and are implementing some type of automated technology such as RFID are gaining huge advantages over their competition who may be using spreadsheets or any other type of old style technology. So let's get into the agenda. So we're going to talk about key parts of an RFID system, the management of that data and the autonomous options that are available to retrieve that data, how you will achieve improved audit readiness. We're going to look at mobile RFID in action. We're going to talk about the benefits of passive RFID applications, how to determine the best performing RFID tag for your particular use case. And we're also going to look at RFID tag printing options, whether you want to print your RFID tags on site or if you wish to go with an outsourcing option. We're also going to look at some RFID tag pitfalls to avoid. We'll look at a few use cases, and then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A session. So I'll turn it over to Sharrieff.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sharrieff Christmas, and I'm going to take you through a couple of slides here. Some of you guys may remember me from some of the sessions down at NPMA, but in regards to RFID, but I want to talk to you guys about a couple of key areas in terms of RFID. So when we talk about an RFID system, there are key parts to an RFID system, and you got to make sure each one of these points and parts come together cohesively. The first piece is the RFID tag. Now Dan's going to talk about the RFID tag, so I'm not going to go in too much, but it's one of the most important pieces to an RFID system. If you get the tag wrong, then 99.9% of the times the system is not going to perform well. So the tag selection, and again, Dan will go into it, and he'll kind of tell you exactly what needs to be done in that process. But when you go from the tag, now we're talking about the reader. So what type of reader are we using? So if we're using a fixed reader, if we're using fixed gateways, or if we've got mobiles that we're using. So those are some considerations as well. Fixed readers, you know, you have to have some serious considerations in terms of how the tags are kind of moving through a specific area. And then do you want it to be directional? Do you want it just to catch the tag? So there's a couple of different things there from a fixed perspective. When you get into the application software, really what you're looking to do is store the data. So one enterprise database or repository where all the tag reads and the software and all the business rules can work together to make sense of what's being read and from the tag, and then what's being, you know, transmitted into the asset detail record. And we'll go into how all that works. But another piece of this is the software, is the middleware. So that's the intelligent piece. So that knows that when, you know, something is read, either directional or if it's in a location, it knows that that particular, you know, tag has been read, and the middleware will work with both the software and the tag to make sure all the data gets to the right points of impact. And on this next slide, we're going to talk about 3 points of impact. So we'll go to the next slide. And this really brings everything together, because there are 3 points of impact when you're talking about an RFID system. The first part is the RFID reads. So like we talked about, the devices, the mobiles, the autonomous gateways, you know, are the gateways being able to detect if an asset's moving in a specific direction, in a room, out of a room, or at a portal can be used in some cases at the dock door. Again, is it leaving the building? Is it coming in? Or is the shipment coming in? Do I have everything? We did a nice, demo down at one of the Zebra conferences where this was last year, where we were actually showing, you know, things coming in and out of a pallet and being, you know, received in to the system. And then from there, you know, we'll talk about, you know, some of the other different points. So the second point of impact is the enterprise database. So once the data is collected, it's in an enterprise database. It now has from a storage perspective, it now has a couple of different options that lead to, you know, one of the third pact of impact, which is, you know, do we need to serve this up to an integration, or do we need to serve this up to our open API so we can move that data from our enterprise database into either our ERP system, you know, or a system of record, our financial records as well. But moving the data from an autonomous perspective from one point of impact to the other point of impact is very key. You can have an RFID system where you're scanning and you're getting those reads and they're going into a spreadsheet. You know, that will do the job temporarily, but what you need from a sophistication standpoint, and what you need from being able to move data from one point of impact to the next point of impact, is just that whole integration from the reader, or, you know, the mobile, or if it's a dock door gateway, all the way through the enterprise system, the enterprise database, into any other points that data needs to go to be able to make actionable insights over that data. What is the data telling me? And that's where you bring it all together. So it's not just about, and when we're talking about RFID, it's not just about scanning stuff and collecting data. It's making good use of that data and repurposing it. You know, if you're doing inventories, or if you're doing reporting, if you're doing 1149s, if you need to take some of that data now and repurpose that and put it on 1149 and do some sort of reporting, or anything has to tie back into the PI system, or if you're using an ERP system where you need to have a connection between the two and make it work so that, you know, both systems know what's going on, and you're not doing it, you know, with the swivel chair, moving data from one spreadsheet to the next. So it's very important to understand the data management of it, because that's really where it really provides the, it provides tremendous value, to the C-suite when you're implementing an RFID system. What data is this going to tell us about how our assets are moving, or where our assets spend most of their time, or who's checking out the assets, who has possession of it for the most of the time. So these are all things, once you have an autonomous system set up and you've nailed the data and you're able to do inventories either with the mobile or with the autonomous gateways or the dock door portals, you have the ability to do all that stuff in real time. So at any time, you can just flip a button and know where your data is or where an item is. And that is very, very valuable to property managers. Next slide. So let's just talk about some of the use cases around, we'll talk about use cases, but just some of the equipment around, and the antenna options around being able to collect the data. So, some of my customers, they'll use an overhead transition reader, meaning they want to understand if something's moving in a room, out of a room. At any time, they can kind of just look at, flip up a report and say, okay, this item has been in this particular location, then it moved over to the next location, and I've got a timestamp. And, all of these different data reading options kind of give you the ability to understand where items are moving and where they're spending their time. So whether it's a transition reader or fork truck reader, let's say you've got you're in a warehouse and you've got, you're stacking items up on 40 feet shelves, and you want to be able to do inventories fairly quickly and easy. So you got that type of an option, and we'll kind of, I don't think we have a slide in terms of what that looks like, but it just literally fits on a forklift, and you kind of just move it up and down the aisles, and that gives you the ability, again, we're using that as a data collection device to get those reads and then get them back to the different points of impact to be able to make sense of the data that we're collecting. We talked about the dock door portals, stuff coming into your environment or things leaving out. Hallway readers, we've got customers that are using that in different government agencies. They've got laptops, and as you know, laptops are definitely high security items. So people need to, or companies or organizations need to know, where their assets are from a security perspective. So you see hallway readers there as well. And some of our manufacturing customers, they're using tunnel readers that are allowing, looking at product as it moves, like in a WIP environment, in terms of if it's going from one area to the next, and being able to kind of, have a timestamp and being able to understand, how much time is being spent on that particular item in a build type process. You got checkout tables where if you're checking out items like tools are very hard because in some cases, tags can, you can't always get a tag on a wrench or a certain size screwdriver, but we've got RFID tables that will actually, make that a little easier from that type of a process. And then the walkthrough readers are just, there's different like patch readers. We have one customer that does, they're monitoring a beach, and they know when residents come in and off that beach based off of the windshield tags that they have. And as they go through the different readers, they know exactly, the timestamp of when they were there and when they came on the beach and when they left. So, there's a lot of different use cases for the different readers and for RFID. We'll talk about that coming up, but definitely wanted to give you, some different options. Next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dan.
All right, so Sharrieff, good information, thank you. So how does RFID work with the mobile? So first and foremost, as far as how it works, using a passive RFID tag, the antenna will emit an RF signal to activate a passive RFID tag. Remember, passive RFID tags, they're not live, there's no batteries, it's not like an active tag. So when the tag enters an antenna's field, it responds by transmitting its information back to this reader. And that reader will pick up the RF signal and decode the information stored in the tag, such as product details or the part number or whatever is embedded in the tag itself. Now with mobile, you have a radio signal transmission from the reader of up to 20 feet or more, and that's determined based on the type of tag and other factors such as environmental conditions. But with a mobile reader, you have the flexibility to walk through your warehouse and inventory all your items. And if you're looking at a warehouse environment where maybe you have 2, 3, or even 4-tier racks where inventories require the use of forklifts, with the mobile, this can either reduce or eliminate the use of forklifts and taking out that risk factor of people using forklifts who maybe are not familiar with using forklifts. The tags can be read through boxes and containers like Pelican cases. The point I want to make, however, is RFID cannot be read through metal. So any type of metal container, if there are any assets stored in a metal container, those will not be able to be read. The metal doors would have to be open, or the tag can be placed on the outside of the container. It can be read as long as it's not blocking through a metal surface. Tags can be placed on items, whether they're different styles, cardboard boxes, and we'll get into this a little bit later. The key is when you're using the mobile solution is finding the tag that's most suitable for the environmental condition that's going to be exposed to. So in this particular case, when we're showing a warehouse environment, that's one particular case. Maybe you have an office environment. Maybe you have a test environment where there may be changes in temperature, or the assets may be exposed to perhaps harsh chemicals or any other type of strenuous test environments. That's where reviewing the tags to make sure the most suitable tag is applied to the appropriate asset will allow the mobile device to pick up that read the best way possible. Next slide. So here's where we get into a little more detail about passive RFID. Again, no batteries are used, and this is one of the main reasons why A2B Tracking recommends a passive RFID application. It is the most cost-effective tag to purchase as opposed to an active tag. Active tags require batteries, so you have the cost of the tag, which is higher than a passive tag. You have the cost of the batteries, as well as the maintenance to replace those batteries, all key factors to review. Now, when you're looking at this picture here, we have 3 different types of assets. We've got a laptop, we've got a cardboard box, and we've got a Pelican case. 3 different types of surfaces. So we're going to talk later about how testing is so crucial to choosing the right tag, making your RFID application, having it be a successful implementation. You need to understand all of those conditions and the surfaces that passive RFIDs are going to be applied to. The vast majority of tags are with an adhesive backing. There are other types of tags, such as hang tags. Some tags will have plastic cases encoded in them where you can rivet a tag onto a particular asset. But the tag, the key point I want to make here is the tag must be compatible with the item while not jeopardizing the use case of that item or the performance of that item. Next slide. Okay, benefits of passive RFID tags. Before I get into this, I just want to distinguish one thing. We're talking about RFID tags that are going directly on assets. There is a MIL Standard 129 clause, which is also for a RFID tag. That is a shipping label tag. It is a 4x6 label. That type of RFID inlay tag, you don't really need to be concerned about long term or the entire life cycle of the asset. That type of tag is just to monitor the shipment, and really all it needs to do is just last for the transit time of the shipment until it arrives at the end destination. I just wanted to make that point that we're not talking about those tags. We're just talking about tags going directly on assets. So again, benefits of passive RFID tags: cost to implement, right? Quickest time to value. How can you get the quickest return on your investment? As Sharrieff had mentioned earlier, the tag is like the foundation of any RFID application. Choosing the right tag and doing your due diligence in choosing the appropriate tag or tags is going to make a profound difference in how successful and how accurate your inventories are going to be, how accurate your scans are going to be, whether it's a mobile device or the fixed readers or autonomous robots that Sharrieff had mentioned earlier. The right tag for the right asset for the right environmental condition will go a long way to getting you the quickest time to value. Active tags, again, very expensive, very costly. It'll really strain your budget. There's no maintenance, again, with passive RFID tags. They will last 20 years or more, depending on the life cycle of the asset and its conditions. And most importantly, passive RFID tags, they come in an endless variety. So finding the appropriate tag for any type of asset or environmental condition today is out there. And one of the key points, or one of the key obstacles in the past for RFID has always been metal assets, right? Can RFID work with metal? Well, again, an RFID tag can be read if it's placed on a metal asset or a metal surface. The key is choosing a tag that's suitable for a metal application. And RFID tags, passive RFID tags, they come with what is called an offset or even very thin foam backing to absorb the reflection so that you get the signal to reach a mobile device or fixed reader when it is a metal application. Very important. Next slide. So tag selection. Most people, when they talk about RFID applications, they get all excited about, okay, what type of tag do I want to use? How much is it going to cost? Do I need different types of tags, different sizes, durability? All these questions come into play. So the areas that you want to look at to review are: know all your assets that need to be tagged. Do you have all laptops? Great, one tag will suffice. But if you have different types of assets, knowing the surfaces of those assets, plastic, cardboard, metal, whatever the situation is, there are different tags for different applications. There are some universal tags that can be used on metal surfaces as well as cardboard, plastics. That can also be done, but then it gets into a condition of price. Universal tags tend to be a little bit more than if you need, let's say, a paper RFID tag. So consideration of the assets will also go a long way in reducing your budget in terms of the tag cost. Knowing the environmental conditions. Just because the asset is stored indoors, what is the condition indoors? Is it just an office environment with room temperature? Is it a warehouse environment? Is it a test environment? We're exposed to grueling type of situations. Do the assets, are they going to be exposed to any washing? Are they going to be exposed to any harsh chemicals? That's when you might look at a more heavy duty, durable RFID tag, or an RFID tag that's enclosed in a casing to protect it. And then you also want to look at what Sharrieff talked about earlier, all the autonomous options that are available to you, whether they're fixed readers, mobile devices, autonomous robots, making sure that you have a tag that has an appropriate read range capability. For a mobile unit, it's fairly easy, right? You can get up to it within a few feet, but perhaps you have a fixed reader that's over a dock door or some type of egress, and maybe that the height of that opening is maybe 15 feet. You want to be sure the tag can meet that read range, or you want to look at how you're going to mount those fixed readers. And most importantly, it's testing. What will typically happen is, once you've identified all the assets, environmental conditions, and your expectations for read range, your supplier will recommend appropriate tags to test for those environmental conditions, and then you're able to identify the most appropriate tag for the conditions that you're faced with. And that's why it's so clear why RFID tag testing is so important. So how do you get the tags? You know, do you want to print your tags on site, or do you want to outsource it? So let's look at the pros and cons of both options. So let's say you're looking at doing it on demand. You want to do it in-house. Well, some of the pros: it eliminates the concerns about lead time and additional cost issues that you're dealing with an outsourced vendor. You know, how much is the tag going to cost? How much is shipping going to cost you? If you need the tags right away, is there a priority service charge? You can design and encode your own label templates and layouts right on demand, on site. This is a key point here. You save time and money on short-run print jobs as opposed to paying minimum order fees from a vendor and waiting for a small number of labels to arrive at your door. So you want to look at your requirements. When you need RFID tags, are they going to come in small quantities, maybe 5 or 10 pieces? Or are you going to print larger runs, maybe a couple of hundred or 1,000, whatever the case may be? If you have to outsource small quantities, usually a vendor is going to have a minimum order charge or a minimum order quantity. So being able to print on site is going to save you tremendous amounts of money in that particular area. Now, the cons are: you need someone available with the expertise to be able to print and encode RFID labels, and having a backup person available if that person is sick, on vacation, or just unavailable to do it. You have an initial investment for the printer and the appropriate consumables, labels, ribbon, etc. And you need to maintain appropriate inventory levels. The shelf life of the labels, and generally we're talking about the adhesives, is a 1-year shelf life. So those labels need to be applied to assets within 1 year. Otherwise, the adhesive generally, while it will stick to the asset, it's the matter of the life cycle of the asset. So you want to use those labels within its appropriate shelf lifetime. So if we go to the next slide, here's the pros and cons of outsourcing. Well, you don't have to worry about buying a printer and any associated consumables. You don't have to worry about having someone on site to be able to make these labels if you're able to find a vendor that can produce very high quality and RFID labels to your liking. Printing vendors, this is their area of expertise, right? So they can offer many different tag types, tag styles, printing options. Perhaps you may want color on your RFID labels. Typically, if you do that on site, you don't have the color option, but vendors can provide that for you. On the con side, however, it's finding a reliable vendor that you can trust and who consistently provides you with high quality labels in a timely manner. There's always the process that you have to deal with every time you have to place an order, right? You've got to call the vendor for a quote. You got to send them a purchase order. You got to send them data. They have to send you a proof so you can see exactly what that label is, and it's going to be delivered to you with the layout that you approved on. And you got to make sure that they're shipping you your labels in a timely manner. It's not only the production time, but there's also the transit time. And once it leaves the vendor's dock, now it's in UPS or FedEx hands, and hopefully there's no issues with delays of the delivery or it being lost altogether. So there's various pros and cons to both options. What I would concentrate on looking at is how many tags you need to print. Do you have the bandwidth to have someone to do this on site? And then you can make a determination what makes the most sense for you from a cost perspective, but also your fulfillment perspective as well. Some of our customers, they don't look at cost, they just look at, I can't wait for other vendors, I need to be able to print tags on demand. Some, the cost is more of a factor. So you weigh the pros and cons of both options and you simply choose which option works best for your particular requirement. Next slide. So here's some of the RFID tag pitfalls to avoid. Purchasing RFID tags too early in the process and making an assumption that all tag is any tag and it will work. Definitely not true. Again, consider all the assets that need to be marked. Look at the appropriate real estate options that you have. Perhaps you only have a limited area to put a tag on. That will affect the size. That will affect the size of the inlay within the tag. That affects the read range. Know your environmental conditions. Again, test environments, office environments, warehouse environments. Know what your read range expectations are going to be and what you expect the tag to be. Testing will identify how good a read range you'll get. Have a good understanding of what devices you're going to be using. Is it just going to be mobile RFID readers? Is it going to be mobile and fixed, autonomous robots? If it's just mobiles or just fixed, well, it's an easy test. You don't have to worry about multiple autonomous devices. But the key is to take the time and do your due diligence to test, test, and test. That way you can leave that process knowing that you fully vetted and come to a conclusion as to what the most appropriate tag that will give you the best performance, also taking into account the price so that you can concern yourself on the budget side as well. Next slide. We'll take it over, Sharrieff.
All right, so let's talk about some use cases. Now, we can talk about RFID, we can talk about tags, but where is it actually in use and in action with our customers? And these customers I'm going to talk about, we're not going to mention them by name, but within the last 12 months, they've moved from spreadsheets and barcode. Some still use barcode because with an RFID system, you can use both barcode and RFID. That's not, it's not one over the other. One sometimes can be the better choice. So this particular customer, which is a university research facility up in the Northeast, they had 50,000 assets that they were tracking, and the time to perform an inventory, would take them about a year because they'd have to throw labor at it, and also they had to reach a threshold of about at least 85% of the assets being found. And if they didn't reach that threshold, they'd have to redo the inventory. So it was a constant effort. Yes, they were passing audits, but they were throwing a lot of labor at it. So with our solution, which, and this is a good illustration of if not just talking about RFID, because RFID is one piece, but how does that really make sense for property managers? So, this should kind of tie it all together. If you're tracking items, if you've got a DCMA audit, that with RFID, you've got the ability to do inventories quick, fast, and efficient. And if you can't find things, we'll talk about some of the technology that allows you to then find it, that gives you a little bit more of a benefit than, not a little bit, a lot. More of a benefit than just straight barcode. And with this customer, the solution was a UC Web property management system. There wasn't a different system. It's all in one. So RFID, property management functions, connections into the PI system. They were able to perform those physical inventories, find missing assets. And when they find those missing assets, they're using what we call pro-locate, which is the ability to go into an area where there may be many tags or tagged items and just focus on one, because it's the needle in the haystack that you're trying to find. And you can definitely, as long as you have it that item tagged with an RFID tag and commissioned in the system, you have the ability to find that fairly quickly, which comes into really comes into use when you're trying to find assets. So the solution was our UC Web property management system. It also allowed them to automate reporting of IUIDs. So it wasn't just the RFID tracking item. It was both a combination of, yes, we have to do inventories, but we also have to report or register our IUIDs into the PI system. So, they're using both fixed readers as well as mobile readers to do their inventories. They're using the fixed readers in more of a work and process perspective, in terms of being able to know when things kind of move down the line into different areas, whether it's development or, let's say, it's pre-production all the way down to a finished good. So they know where those items are tracked and they're moving. So when they went and did the physical inventories, they were able to do it on the first pass, opposed to taking a couple of different passes in order to get to 85%. And that's really, the key point in the outcome. So they also were able to do a full inventory and get that accuracy rate, above 90%. And it allowed them to save a whole bunch of labor hours, in order to do that. And then the other thing is with the automated reporting into the PI system, one click, they were doing all their registrations into the PI system, in some cases in bulk, and it gave them a lot of flexibility. They weren't going outside the system, keying items and things of that nature. So this is a good illustration of where not just RFID, but all of the functionality of, actual, things that you have to do as a property manager, how a system like this that, has both the RFID capability, but also the reporting capability into PI is far greater of an asset than a system that just does RFID. So I wanted to make that point, because it ties it all together. It's all in one. It's, and if you need to integrate into other systems, it can do that as well. Next slide. So this GFP contractor that we worked with right around Christmas time, no pun to my last name, but it was a Christmas gift. So this customer, their problem was the inability to be able to get visibility of their assets. They were doing a lot of self-assessing, and which I give them a lot of credit. So they were saying, okay, can we find our assets? Their assets were either at, their warehouse, and then there was another secure facility that was kind of up the road. And, for them, it was, okay, we're not doing too well. And what they implemented in using RFID, they implemented fixed readers to be able to monitor those items in the warehouse. So literally, they had the readers pointed right at them, and if those items moved, they knew if they moved, and if they were inventoried, or they could just look at that item and say, okay, yeah, it's there, we can inventory it, because it was actually being continuously monitored. So they had a different use case. They wanted to have, full total visibility, and some customers, that's what they want to do, because they need to make sure that they can pass their audits. And this was a great illustration. It kind of ties with what we're talking about here, with Dan and the tags, because this customer decided, hey, we want to print our own tags. We don't want to have to, rely on you to spin us up some tags when we need them. And here's where our expertise comes in being able to help them implement that. There's a lot of vendors that can go out there and they can do different things, but in terms of doing the training, showing them how to implement the difference between the printer and then getting the right tags, and being able to bring the whole solution together, this was a huge win from that perspective. So what was the solution? They were using the fixed readers. They also were using the mobiles, because at the secure facility, they wanted to be able to do inventory, so they could tie in to say, okay, yep, we know that we've got stuff in our main warehouse, but when the stuff moves from our main warehouse to the secure facility up the street, we want to make sure that it's actually there. So here's a combination of fixed readers, mobile, and also these guys have IUID requirements as well. So, they're tying it all together. And, the outcome here was complete asset visibility. They're using our Pro Locate if something goes missing. Again, just to talk about that, that's just being able to find specific assets that are missing and are tagged with an RFID tag. It just gives you the ability to go and find that needle in the haystack. So, and that really helps you drive up not availability, but accuracy. So if you don't really have a good process in terms of how to find items when they come missing, then it's almost impossible to drive up accuracy. But these use cases are why property managers need to be looking at RFID, because you can't throw labor at it. You can't always just throw labor at a problem. And in some cases, the technology has afforded itself to solve these problems fairly quickly and easy. It's just a matter of understanding the right tag, the right reader, and having the software being able to hit all of the points of impacts. And then the last point of impact I would use as number 4 would be being able to report into government systems, because systems are great, but you don't want to have siloed systems that do different things. You want one system that can actually, handle all of your requirements. You're printing your tags, you're scanning your tags, that all those scans are being handled in real time. They're updating everything. If you've got APIs that you're pushing data to, that's getting picked up. We've got customers that use CostPoint that with an integration, they're moving data back and forth autonomously. And then the last piece is just reporting that into government system. That is like the cherry on the top. So I'm gonna kick into a quick video, but I really wanted to hammer that home in terms of, the value here of RFID in a property management system, not just a system, but a property management system geared towards the folks that are on this call. So I'll let the video kind of kick off next, and I'm gonna slide back in the background. All right, that's the video portion of our program. I think we'll go to the next slide, and I think we're going to open it up to questions. We appreciate you guys staying with us here. Lot of content, lot of information. If you guys have questions, please put them in the chat. You know, we can be as engaging as you guys want us to be. We've got about, I think, 24 minutes or so, 26 minutes. So we'll open it up to questions. And if you guys have questions, fire away.
Great, Sharrieff. We've got a couple of questions coming in, and let's see. The first one is in regards to implementation and how long does a typical RFID implementation take?
We'll do a little part, both me and Dan. Dan, you talk about the first part, which is mostly the most important part, which is the tag selection. So go ahead.
Yeah, so on the tag selection side, in terms of lead times of the tags, there's mainly two factors. One, how many tags do you need? And what type of tag that we're going to be using would affect the lead time. Typically, let's say we're talking up to 1,000 tags, you're looking at lead times of up to 3 to 4 weeks. Generally, there's a proofing process that's usually done within 24 to 48 hours, and then into straight production time. Now, that's for pre-printed tags. If you just needed blank tags, you're probably looking in the area of 2 to 3 weeks if we're talking about 1,000 tags. Anything more than 1,000, then based on the quantity, the lead time would increase exponentially. But rough numbers, 2 to 3 weeks for blanks and 3 to 4 for pre-printed.
Yeah, and on the system setup side, you're probably looking at anywhere from, I'd say, 45 to 60 days. That's a pretty aggressive time to value. It really depends on where the data is today. So if you're moving data into the system, you know, that's a fairly quick, it can be a very quick exercise, as long as your data is, you know, structured and it's, you know, we don't have to do too much massaging. Once you get the data in the system, it's really the tags, getting the tags into the system. Because what we do is we automate that process. We get those, the tags that are going to be associated to each asset, we'll get them in, because the tags are going to act as that license plate, so that every time it gets interrogated in the field, and then now we're going back into the algorithms in the middleware. It gives the system the ability to know that, okay, I just, you know, read this tag, and it's going to talk back to the, you know, the database and the software to say, okay, this tag was read, it belongs to this asset detail record. Let's update the date and timestamp, and that does that, you know, fairly quickly. So that's why we always say in real time. But, you know, to get the system up and going, we need to make sure we understand, you know, the tags we're going to be putting in, the data. And that pretty much usually takes, and it depends how many assets you have. If you're talking about, you know, hundreds of thousands of assets, that's a process, because now you got to tag things and go out and find them. But for the, you know, most of our customers, you know, getting the system up and running is typically about 60 days, and that's including, you know, ordering the tags, ordering the hardware, whether you're just going with the mobiles or you're going with mobiles, printers, and things of that nature. Hopefully that answers.
A couple of quick notes on that, Sharrieff. If someone's looking for a significant amount of tags, 25, 50, 100,000, if we're in a rush to get going here, we could do some partial shipments, you know, maybe give you 10,000 tags to get started. The other issue is the encoding. You have the option to let the manufacturer default EPC code take place, or if you wanted to override that EPC code with your own internal asset ID number, as long as it follows a hexadecimal format, we could also do that as well.
That's great. That's great, guys. I have a question here from Brian asking about the maximum read range of RFID tags.
Read range will definitely depend on testing. And again, that's where we would look at the asset that's being marked, the type of autonomous solution that you're using, whether it's a fixed reader, mobile, or a robot. But generally speaking, if you're talking laptops, you know, you could easily get 20 feet or more. There's a specialized universal tag that we recommend that has been very, very successful with both mobile and fixed readers. If you're talking cardboard, You probably get 25 feet depending on the situation. It all depends on the type of asset that's being marked, and again, the environmental condition that it's exposed to.
Yep.
Great. And then can you talk about temperature range a little bit for RFID tags?
Yeah, temperature range could run the gamut. It could be up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, 500 degrees. Now you're getting into specialized tags. If you're talking about extreme heat conditions, that would affect the cost because that is a more highly durable tag with temperature tolerances. But again, that would all be vetted out in the testing process, understanding what exactly the the temperature ranges that you need. But it all depends. But certainly we can get way up there. Test. That's what it's about. Yeah, because we can look at a spec sheet and it will say, yeah, this particular tag can handle a temperature range of 500 degrees Fahrenheit. But what the spec sheet doesn't say is on this particular asset or that particular asset. You know, maybe it works this way on a laptop, but maybe it won't work as good on some other type of device. It all depends. But the spec sheets are used as guidelines, and we kind of have an understanding of a number of assets that we've done in the past, so we can make recommendations accordingly.
Great. I've got a question coming in here asking about radio frequency, other frequencies that are coming from electronics in a research facility. How do you guys handle that kind of interference?
Usually we don't run into those situations. There are testing that's done to ensure that, but we really don't run into situations where the frequency is being affected by other frequencies within a particular room. But again, that would come down to testing. And then if there is an issue, we would look at different tags or different type of readers to handle that.
And just to sort of add on to that, have you ever found a situation where the RF signals from your reader, is that affecting other equipment? Has there been situations like that?
No. I haven't seen it. In some cases, we've actually went into places to do that, and I think, and I forget who regulates the actual signal strength or what frequencies, but I think from an RFID perspective, they're all on different lengths. They're not on the same wavelength that from a passive RFID solution opposed to some other RFI, well, no, I don't know, or RFI signal or signal that, or at that specific frequency. They kind of tend to not be on the same level. So I haven't seen it, and then I've been into a couple of labs where that's not been the case, but we would definitely do testing beforehand just to make sure that doesn't cause an issue.
Another quick point too, Dave, as you asked that question, in case anybody's wondering, we partner with Zebra Technologies, and we've gone through a very rigorous testing process so that our tags are compliant and compatible with these particular products, so that would guarantee the success of an implementation as well. And it's not easy to get that certification.
Great. I've got a question here asking again about those environmental conditions. And how which environmental conditions should people be considering as far as affecting read range?
Temperature, for sure, without a question. Temperature is a very key factor. Some assets, let's take linens that have an RFID tag that are going through a wash process. Eventually, it all depends on how long the wash is and how ruggedized it is. But in some cases, you would have to replace tags because they only have a certain shelf life, given the condition that it's going to be exposed to, where linens are constantly being washed. If it's a rental company, for example, they're obviously washing their linens. At some point, you would have to replace the tag. Those types of tags are either stitched or there's a heating process. But eventually, when the read range starts to get affected, the tag is simply replaced.
Yeah, what I find though more often though is metal items. So we've got customers that, metal is they got items that they want to put the metal. They want the tag on the metal. So it's like, you've got to get the right tag for that. And for the most part, when you've got items like, let's say you got a big generator, there's a lot of metal even in a warehouse where there's a lot of metal racks and stuff like that, but they're breathable. They're not all boxed in. As long as things are not boxed in or metal is like covering it, because we can't go through metal, we can't go through water, we can't go through people. So at the end of the day, you got to make sure, and those are all the environmental conversations that we have. And again, like we've been doing this for the last 10 years. So we started doing this from armories, marking guns and tracing them from that perspective, and then moving into a bunch of different areas. So it's not that from our experience, it's just, the government. We also have commercial customers that we deal with that, household names that do RFID. So we see a lot of use cases, but the biggest thing that you want to look at is you just want to make sure that there's not a whole lot of metal, or if there is metal, it's an open, like you got open racks, things aren't closed or walled off. We can't go through concrete as well, so that's another substance that we can't make it through. But before you start any project, you want to make sure you're able to do some testing. Or work with a vendor that has done something similar, or in some cases what we do is a site visit, and we'll come on site, look at everything. We'll bring an RFID reader on, we'll a mobile, and we'll just make sure that your site is conducive to RF signals and there's no issues. Most sites, no problem, but that's a couple of the different options. But if you've got just a regular setup or area, you should be fine.
Yeah, as long as the tags are exposed, and we had mentioned this early in the slide, as long as the asset that is marked with an RFID tag is not enclosed in any type of metal casing, we'll be able to read the tag, or we will find a tag that will be applicable to a metal surface. That's not the big issue anymore. It's whether or not that tag is enclosed in some type of metal enclosure. That's a big no-no, because you won't be able to read it.
Sharrieff, you mentioned ERP system integrations. What about EAM systems such as IBM Maxima?
So that's a good question. So that would be what we would do there, is have a discussion around how Maximo is written. High probability, if there's data that needs to be actually moved between our UC Web platform and Maximo, I would say, yes. We don't have any customers today that are doing that, but any ERP system or system that's of any modern day language, an open API is going to allow you to move data between them. So I would say yes, but we could sit down and have a conversation and figure out if that's something that you need to that's possible or is worth investigating. So we could definitely have a conversation on that, but I don't see it as a problem.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I've got another question that came in here from Ethan, asking about if we've gotten any feedback from users about being tracked. For example, a person walking around a facility with a laptop, and that they feel like they're being tracked or located all the time.
No, I mean, it's the laptop that we're tracking, and in this case, the customer I'm talking about, they've got they know exactly when someone leaves the building, when they come in the building, and when that laptop is moved to specific floors. So I haven't heard anything negative on that from that perspective. They just know that those laptops are very they have sensitive information. It's very, very, they've got some security information that if, falls in the wrong hands, that could be an issue. So, in the case that I mentioned, I do believe that they did tell their employees that, we're putting an RFID tag on the laptop, and, it's going to know movements. It's going to track movements as you move through. So I haven't heard any kickback on that or issues.
Right.
Key point two, Dave. We don't recommend an active tag solution. So none of the tags that are being used on an A2B system are constantly sending out a signal. These are all passive tag applications. The only way that tag is going to be read is by the reader. That's going to excite the label, the inlay, to get the read of that tag.
Yep.
So the only way it's going to be read is if it passes through a fixed reader or an egress. But as far as a human person being tracked, no. Now you could put a passive tag on, let's say, a work badge, for example. If they're carrying a work badge, around their neck and they're passing through an egress, it could be read that way. But we don't concentrate on that.
Yeah.
I've got a question here that I think I'm not exactly sure what the question is, but expand on the idea of how RFID assigns a location when it reads a tag.
So that's all in the software. So when I'm going, and it's a combination between the middleware, the reader, whether it's a mobile reader or not, right? So if I go into a location and I say, yeah, I'm going to, with my mobile, I'm inventorying this particular area. All my locations are set up. So this is where we're talking about, it's not just scanning into a sheet. Everything is pre-set up where I know that this particular tag is associated to this asset detail record that has all the pedigree information, location, custodian. So once I have the reader set that I'm doing this location and I go and do an inventory, then I know it's going to update that that's the location in which this particular item was found and inventoried. Now, if I'm using a fixed reader and that fixed reader is let's say hallway A, when that particular item, let's say someone has it in their hand, they're walking through and it gets scanned in the fixed reader, then it's going to say, well, this item passed through this area. The last known location was, and let's call it dock door A. So I know that this went through dock door A because the particular hexadecimal string, which is the license plate that sits inside of the asset detail record, is going to then update it and say, yes, it went through this particular area at this time, and that's how it all works, opposed to just scanning a bunch of tags and having no middleware or intelligence to kind of understand, your layout of your facility, because everything's, drilled down by location, and everything is assigned a location. So when it goes through the location and the tag's read, then it knows at that location it was read, and then it just updates the system and timestamps when it was read and in the location. Very simple. But
yeah, just a reminder.
If you want to have a conversation offline on that, I'd be happy to as well.
Yeah, just a quick reminder, whether it's 100 assets or 100,000 assets that you're tracking, every single RFID tag, that EPC code is a global license plate. Every single one is unique. So there's not going to be any duplication of two of the same laptops. No, everyone is uniquely identified.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. We don't have any other questions, but if people do have questions, there's an email address or a phone number on this final slide, and feel free to reach out to the guys. Dan and Sharrieff, thank you very much for sharing your information.
One last thing, Dave. Hey, you guys were a great audience. We appreciate it, and we will see you in Reno. We got a couple classes set up. And we look forward to engaging with you down at Reno.
It's going to be great. You're going to have Christmas in July, people.
There you go, man.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. We hope you found this informative, and have a good afternoon.
And thank you to Lisa and the NPMA team for putting this together.
Yes, Lisa. Of course.
Much appreciated, guys. We'll give you a round of applause.
Lisa down there too.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Take care.